A year after the wedding, Julian's kept canary had someone loosen the ropes of my wire harness. My body was impaled by a meter-long steel bar. When Julian arrived, blood had already spread to his feet. His eyes were empty, but when he caught sight of the bucket full of prop blood beside him, they suddenly brightened. What act is this now? A sob story? I'm telling you, Ivy is prone to scarring. If she doesn't recover, you'll atone until you die. Julian carefully touched Ivy's left cheek. There was a slight abrasion on it from flying gravel. The steel bar piercing my body was hidden by my long, sweeping dress. I wanted to speak, but the pain rendered me speechless. Julian carried Ivy into the ambulance. As he left, he said, "Unless she apologizes, no one is allowed to take her down." Julian left. I watched the departing ambulance in despair. The blood was rapidly draining from my body. The crew members silently cleared the scene. But remembering Julian's words, no one dared approach me. "Mr. Julian is going too far. Ivy just got a little scratch, right? And he wants his wife hanging there under the sun." The others quickly exchanged knowing glances. "Don't say that. You're new here. You don't know the ins and outs. This Cora only has the title of Mrs. Julian. She's treated worse than a servant in the Shun family." I watched my soul slowly detach from my body. I smiled bitterly in my heart. Yes, I should have let go long ago. The girl who had just spoken up for me was puzzled. But I think Ivy looks a lot like Mrs. Julian. Mr. Julian must love Mrs. Julian, right? The person next to her looked disdainful. Cora was Mr. Julian's first love. She abandoned him and married someone else when his family was ruined. Now that Mr. Julian has become a rising star, and he already has Ivy, she came crawling back. "Tell me, does that kind of woman deserve to be loved?" These words fell into my ears without missing a single one, and my heart ached terribly. So everyone thought I abandoned Julian? But that wasn't the case. When the last drop of blood drained away, my soul completely detached from my body and floated uncontrollably to Julian's side. Inside the hospital room, Ivy, sporting a face that was about to heal, was surrounded by an entire top-notch medical team. Tears of grievance were still falling. "Julian G, it hurts so much, I'm so scared. I'm just afraid of heights," so I asked Cora to stand in for me and film a scene on the wire, but she deliberately loosened the ropes and rushed at me. If I hadn't dodged quickly, I would have been disfigured, sob sob sob. Julian looked at Ivy's half-face, which was gradually being wrapped like a dumpling. His brow furrowed deeply. "Will it leave a scar?" Ivy immediately gave a look, and the leading doctor understood and nodded solemnly. "Mr. Julian, if it happened to an ordinary person, it would be nothing. But Ms. Ivy is prone to scarring and has delicate skin. Any carelessness could leave a scar." Julian slammed the table, without any hesitation. "Give the order. Even if Cora apologizes, it's no use. Keep her hanging there all night. Let her learn a lesson." That night, Julian ate dinner alone in the empty dining room. He looked at the roast duck on the table. He suddenly remembered that the first dish I ever cooked was also roast duck. But I burnt the duck completely black, carbonized it. Julian couldn't help but laugh, and the words I said that year immediately echoed in his mind. "Don't laugh at me. Otherwise, when we graduate and get married next year, I'll make roast duck for you every day." Julian's chopsticks froze in midair. The roast duck fell onto the table, and his eyes suddenly turned red. "Liar!" Julian closed his eyes, not knowing what he was thinking, and then he opened them and sighed softly. He picked up his phone. "Did Cora apologize? If she knows she's wrong, take her down." The person on the other end sounded sluggish, with a hint of panic. Mr. Julian, Mrs. Julian hasn't said a word. She's been motionless." Julian's knuckles on the phone turned white. "What about dinner? Did she eat?" The voice was still soft. "No, Mr. Julian." Julian squeezed out a cold smile from between his teeth. "Good, she's still using a hunger strike to throw a tantrum at me. How did you treat me back then?" Julian covered his unfocused right eye, and my heart trembled. Speaking of which, his family's ruin, including his eye, was all because of my blindness. The year we graduated from college, Julian's parents' second venture failed again. They were forced to jump off a building after accumulating a large debt. Only Julian was left to face it alone. The classmates around me all begged me to help him. They all knew that with my family background, that amount of debt was nothing. But I left. I didn't even say goodbye to Julian. I quietly left the country. The day Julian found out, the debt collectors happened to block the door. He held his phone and repeatedly dialed my number. His expression slowly changed from disbelief to utter coldness. Finally, Julian personally gouged out his right eye, and his ruthless reputation spread. The loan shark boss appreciated him, exceptionally gave him a 3-year deadline, and loaned him a business startup fund. Now, not only had he cleared his debt, but he had also become a rising star in the business world with his own means. No one knew the hardships and twists and turns in between. Julian looked up, the moisture in his eyes disappearing. Okay, you tell Cora, she can starve herself for the rest of her life if she has the guts. Everyone will be happy. I smiled bitterly. Tears welled up from the corners of my eyes. Julian. So you hate me that much? Good, I have fulfilled your wish. Everyone is happy. During the year I returned to Julian's side, because of that unclarified past. Even though he brought other women home every night, I still lowered myself and played the humble servant, willing to serve them. I always believed that after the storm comes the rainbow. Julian would turn back into the familiar person I knew. But it wasn't until I was pierced by the steel bar, when Julian left without hesitation, that I realized how wrong I was. Julian, loving you is really exhausting. Suddenly, my soul began to tremble, and a dense, numbing pain came from every part of my body. It felt like being torn apart by something. I instinctively grabbed at Julian in front of me, but my body passed right through him without leaving a trace. The next morning, the phone rang shrilly. It was the staff member left at the film set to watch over me. Mr. Julian, something bad has happened. Mrs. Julian has disappeared. There's just a costume hanging there. And there's a pack of wild dogs below. Julian woke up instantly, his voice hoarse and unrecognizable. What did you say? At the same time, news came from the hospital. Mr. Julian, please come quickly. Something has happened to Ms. Ivy. Julian ignored the doctor's words, holding his phone, his heart pounding. He knew I was afraid of missing his messages, so I always had my phone with me. But from yesterday until now, I hadn't sent him a single message. Julian stared blankly, scrolling up through the chat history, filled with my own fragmented words. Good morning, Julian. I specially learned how to make egg custard tarts today. Try them later. Julian, it's our wedding anniversary today. Aren't you coming back? The last one stopped at yesterday afternoon. I said. Julian, I'm going to replace Ms. Ivy for the wire work. I don't know why, but I feel so uneasy. Do you think I'll have an accident and die? Anxiety surged like a tide. Julian's fingers trembled as he made the first phone call to me since we got married. No one is answering. Julian stood up abruptly and ordered the driver to get the car ready. But halfway there, Ivy called sobbing. Julian, Cora. Cora came to the hospital. She wants to kill me. When Julian arrived at the ward, Ivy was covering half of her scratched face, crying her heart out. Julian, look, this is the note Cora just left. She wants to kill me. On the note, Julian recognized my handwriting at a glance. He breathed a sigh of relief, but the hand holding the note gradually turned white. It said, Julian, I think you're disgusting. Don't you love messing around with your canary? I'll ruin her face first, then kill her. Julian sneered. He's disgusting? What about the account of me betraying him and marrying another man back then? Back then, Julian and I were the model couple everyone envied in school. When I left him, I was already pregnant. Julian looked at his chat box with me and laughed angrily. Cora, you're still the same as before. You just love teasing me, seeing me freak out. Is it fun? A woman who jumped into another man's bed in the blink of an eye. In the 7 years you left me, you've been thoroughly used, haven't you? Saying I'm disgusting, you're not worthy. I gasped for breath, my fragmented soul barely recovering from the pain of being torn apart. Julian's words almost shattered it. I didn't expect that he would assume it was me based on just a note, without even investigating. Even more, I never imagined that after knowing him for 12 years, Julian would think of me so viciously, would say such things to me. I covered my numb heart. Tears fell uncontrollably. Julian. I regretted it, regretted ever falling in love with you. Julian pulled off his belt, held Ivy's head down, and sent me photos unscrupulously. He wrote, "You don't have the right to tell me what to do. I give you half an hour to get over here, bring condoms and serve me and Ivy. Otherwise, you can forget about the title of Mrs. Julian. 10 minutes, half an hour. The messages sent still sank without a trace. Julian stared at his phone with bloodshot eyes. At the door, Ivy, dressed up beautifully, shyly reappeared in front of Julian, biting her lip coquettishly. "Julian, I'm ready, let's go." Julian expressionlessly swept over the large expanse of whiteness she deliberately revealed, but saw a face that was 70% similar to mine. Julian's eyes deepened slightly. Then he gritted his teeth and said, "Call the media. I want to have a wedding with Ivy." I understand Julian. He is trying every possible way to force me out. Sending threatening photos and information on the phone didn't work, so he's going to do it for real. He wants me to feel a sense of crisis and appear at the wedding. Julian firmly believes I am greedy, materialistic, and only want to preserve the title of Mrs. Julian. But too bad. I don't want the position of Mrs. Julian anymore. Julian's current status is among the best in the industry. His wedding. In just 2 hours, it was decorated luxuriously and extravagantly, with every seat below the stage filled. Ivy stood beside Julian, incredibly happy, wearing a wedding dress. The media reporters seized the opportunity to interview Mr. Julian. "It is well known that you have already married Cora, so what is this wedding today?" Julian stared at the crowd below. His eyes were sore, but he couldn't find any trace of me. "Good, let's see how long you can hold out." Julian, who never liked to be ostentatious, directly and generously hugged Ivy. "Holding this wedding today is to tell everyone, the person I love is Ivy. As for Cora, I will divorce her after the wedding." The whole place was in an uproar. Ivy was overjoyed. Her face almost split from smiling. She had long heard that Julian had a white moonlight that he couldn't get, so she risked cosmetic surgery to look like me. Originally, she just wanted to use Julian to make her famous. Unexpectedly, Julian would fall in love with her and publicly give her a title. You have to know. When I came back, Julian didn't even hold a proper wedding, just faking a little note, and I won. So what if she's the white moonlight? She still can't beat me. Seeing that the time was approaching, Ivy happily reminded Julian to start the wedding. But Julian remained motionless, staring intently at the wedding entrance. He didn't believe I could resist coming. Finally, a shadow appeared, and Julian revealed a triumphant smile. But the person who appeared was a little girl. The little girl walked all the way to the stage, her face bearing a serenity far beyond her age. "Whose child are you? Don't come here to cause trouble. Hurry up and leave." Ivy frowned and shooed her away. The little girl completely ignored her, pointing at Julian with a small finger. "I'm looking for him." Julian scrutinized the little girl's appearance, which was incredibly similar to mine, his heart pounding like thunder, strange thoughts flashing through his mind. "Who are you? What do you want with me?" The little girl said, word by word. "I'm here to invite you to Cora's funeral." Julian seemed not to have heard clearly and asked again. "You said, attend whose funeral?" "Cora's." The little girl's clear voice echoed in the air. Julian took a step back, almost falling. A funeral? How could that be? She had just appeared at the hospital, scratching Ivy. Julian belatedly scanned the area below the stage. My figure was still nowhere to be seen. He sneered repeatedly, picked up the media microphone, and shouted into the air, "Cora, you get out here. I know you must be hiding nearby, sending a little girl to disrupt my wedding, right? How childish can you be? I'm warning you, if you don't come out now, I will really marry Ivy. 3, 2, 1. Cora, you get out here." Julian shouted louder and louder, his voice a little hoarse. The entire hall of guests stared blankly at this scene, but no figure appeared. Julian shook his head in anger. He hadn't expected that I, who always valued wealth and status, even returned to his side from abroad when he became successful. Even when he deliberately paraded inappropriate women in front of me. deliberately making me sad, repeatedly trampling on my self-esteem. I still remained without complaint, always wearing a smiling face, just for the sake of the power and influence brought by the title of Mrs. Julian. And this time, I was actually holding such a big grudge against him. Julian clutched his chest, where he felt both anger and panic. Seeing the crowd starting to give meaningful glances, Ivy couldn't stand it anymore. Today was supposed to be the greatest day of her life. Success was just around the corner. How could she let me ruin it? Ivy gave the MC a look, and the MC wiped the sweat from his forehead, stepped forward with a forced smile, and carefully said, Mr. Julian, the time has arrived. If we don't start the wedding soon, it might be unlucky. Ivy also smiled and grabbed Julian's arm. That's right, Julian. Don't let such a little girl's joke ruin our wedding. Let's continue. Julian didn't say anything. After a moment of silence, he sighed and said to the little girl, Go back and tell Cora, if she doesn't come before the end of the wedding, not only will I divorce her, but I will also make sure she doesn't get a single cent and has no place to stand in Northern City. The little girl blinked her big eyes and repeated again, I am here to invite you to Cora's funeral. Are you sure you won't go? Julian rubbed his eyebrows in frustration. No, I won't. What's your relationship with her? The little girl said clearly, Cora is my mother. My soul floated beside my daughter, wanting to reach out and touch her one last time. But it was in vain. Daughter, I'm sorry, I wasn't a good mother in this life, unable to protect you, but thankfully, you still have a father. I looked at Julian with hopeful eyes. Julian's hand paused, carefully examining the little girl in front of him, and asked in a trembling voice, how old are you this year? Who's your father? 7 years old, my father is Donovan. Donovan, the man I married after I left Julian. The glimmer of hope in Julian's eyes died out. How ridiculous. For a fleeting moment, he actually thought the child in front of him was his and my child. Cora, you aborted our child, and directly had another child with another man. You really have no heart. No, it's not like that. I shook my head repeatedly, but no one could hear me. Julian seemed to have suddenly been drained of his strength, almost falling directly off the stage. Ivy quickly grabbed him, looking at my daughter with a smug and mocking expression. I was wondering why she's so annoying. Turns out she's Cora's bastard child with someone else. Your mother has repeatedly opposed me, trying to steal Julian from me. Even deliberately trying to disfigure me, wanting my life. They say the mother's debt is repaid by the daughter. Today, I have to teach you a good lesson on behalf of your mother. With things having reached this point, the guests and media reporters below the stage had long discreetly left the scene. No one dared to linger or film any longer. Seeing Ivy taking my daughter away, I was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot. I don't know why, ever since my soul separated from my body, I've only been able to closely follow Julian. Wherever Julian is, I am forced to go. Now that Ivy has taken my daughter away, I can't follow her to check on her. According to her personality, my daughter will definitely be in danger. Julian. Julian. I anxiously pressed myself against Julian's ear and shouted, praying that he would come back to his senses and go to see my daughter. But he didn't. He slumped straight onto the stage, his eyes vacant, muttering to himself, Cora, you are really cruel, betraying me. Killing our child wasn't enough. You even let your child with another man deliberately come to anger me. I knelt in front of him, tears of anxiety streaming down, shouting desperately, She's your daughter. She's in danger now, you have to go save her. At the same time, my daughter's heart-wrenching cry came from behind the stage. The loud noise finally brought Julian back to his senses. He looked around, following the sound. But before he could reach the back of the stage, the police called. Hello, is this Mr. Julian? We have discovered a large amount of blood at the film set. We need you to come in and cooperate with the investigation. Crew? Bloodstains. Julian frowned and stopped in his tracks. He asked in detail about the specific location of the discovery, and when he learned that it was exactly where I was doing the wire work, his heart pounded uncontrollably. Why? What was going on? Wasn't all the blood he'd seen before just stage blood? After so many years of violent storms, Julian had never felt so flustered. Without hesitation, Julian went straight to the police station. I looked towards the room my daughter was being taken into, anxiously, but unable to get any closer. My soul followed Julian directly. Upon arriving at the set, the police pointed to the location of the bloodstains. Analyzing the situation in detail with Julian, the steel bar that had been standing on the ground was gone. Clearly, it had been deliberately removed. Now all that remained there was my costume. The police officer's expression was serious. Mr. Julian, according to the amount of blood loss and the surrounding conditions, the person certainly couldn't have survived. And we also found several stray dogs nearby. After comparing the bloodstains on their mouths, we confirmed it was the same person. So it's very likely. Julian was stunned. He suddenly remembered the phone call the crew made to him this morning. Looking at the large area of blood in front of him, Julian felt a wave of dizziness. No, it can't be impossible. This must all be Cora's trick to mess with me. She just wants to see me suffer. The police officer saw Julian's disoriented state. He knew there was no point in asking more questions, and quickly ordered people to review the surveillance footage. After retrieving the surveillance footage, Julian stared intently with bloodshot eyes. The image was blurry, but it was still roughly visible that a man had taken me away. Julian breathed a sigh of relief, a confident smile appearing on his face. He knew it. This was all my trick. There was no way I could have died just like that. But when he followed the police tracking the surveillance all the way to the location, Julian's face changed. A funeral home? Julian violently pushed open the door. The first thing he saw was a huge black and white photo of me, hanging in the center. And below it was a coffin. Donovan wasn't surprised to see Julian. His eyes just held an undeniable hatred. "You've come," Donovan said coldly, pointing to my memorial tablet. "Offer incense to Cora." Julian carefully surveyed the scene, as if looking for something. "Where's Cora? Tell her to come out and see me. She colluded with you, her ex-husband, to stage this whole thing today. What does it all mean?" Donovan chuckled mockingly, looking at Julian with eyes that treated him like garbage. "Staging? Who told you this was acting? Cora is already dead. Killed by you. Impossible." Julian shouted hoarsely. He searched wildly around the hall, like a madman, but found nothing, except for the coffin placed in the center. He took a deep breath, finally mustered the courage, and slowly pushed open the coffin lid. The person lying inside was indeed me, but I looked nothing like the me Julian remembered. My body had been mangled by stray dogs, almost completely missing my legs. My 10 slender fingers had also disappeared. And from the side of my body to the back, there was a hole as thick as a steel bar, empty and dark. Julian was so shocked that he couldn't believe his eyes. He rubbed them repeatedly, then slowly opened them again. The dark seam before him remained. "Cora." Julian tentatively called my name, instinctively reaching out to take my hand. But he could no longer hold it. Only now did Julian truly realize. I seemed to be really dead. Not acting, not a trick, but really dead. The red veins in his eyes burst, and tears fell one by one onto my mutilated body. He wanted to hold me, but there was nowhere to start. How could this be? How could this happen? Who did this? Julian knelt before my coffin, gnashing his teeth and beating his chest. Donovan stood beside him, his eyes also filled with tears, and said coldly, "Who did it? You have the nerve to ask." "Cora was doing the wire work for your golden bird when an accident occurred. She was pierced by a steel bar that stood up on the ground. She died right in front of you." Julian shook his head, crying, and fragments of past events flashed through his mind. Nyanua's lips when I was pierced. Her pale face. Her desperate eyes. All the signals of her asking for help flashed through his mind like a revolving lantern. And he missed the only chance to save me. He even left me hanging in the air after death, unable to rest, and then allowed the stray dogs to. The more Julian recalled, the more painful his heart became. His chest felt like a large hole had been torn in it, and the wind, carrying dust, rushed in. Every breath made his organs tremble with pain. Donovan looked down at Julian. "If I had known this would happen, I would have stopped her from coming back to you, even if it meant dying myself. Even if it meant Cora hating me for the rest of my life. Cora loved you so much, But how did you treat her? Not only did you make her suffer grievances for the past year, but now you directly took her life. Something in Julian's mind snapped. He stood up and punched Donovan directly in the face. What right do you have to say that? If it weren't for you back then, Cora wouldn't have left me, and I wouldn't have hated her. You had her, and if you had cherished her and lived a harmonious life for 7 years, why would she have come back to me? What right do you have to blame me here? Donovan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Without a word, he kicked Julian and spat on him. Pa, I really didn't expect you to be such a scum. It was a curse for Cora to fall in love with you. Why did Cora come back to you? Don't you know? These days I've been with her, it's only been a marriage in name. Because Cora has always loved you. Julian was stunned for a moment, asking in disbelief, what are you saying? All these years you and Cora? Impossible. If that's really the case, then why did she choose to betray me and marry you back then? Donovan sighed, his gaze falling on my coffin, or seemed to be speaking to my soul across the coffin. I'm sorry, Cora. I promised you before that I would never reveal the truth, but now you're dead. I don't want you to die like this without knowing why, and as for your family, I will definitely protect them. I pursed my lips. Tears welled up in my eyes. Julian was confused by these words. What do you mean? What does Cora leaving me have to do with her family? Donovan picked up incense and bowed to my memorial tablet again, and finally spoke the truth. When Julian's parents' second venture failed, and they were heavily in debt, I immediately went to my parents and asked them to help and settle Julian's debts. At that time, Julian and I were an enviable couple, a talented man and a beautiful woman, but my family had never been optimistic about it, and had always wanted me to separate from Julian. Nothing else. It was just because of the huge difference in our backgrounds back then. My parents thought I was young and didn't understand, and was bewitched by Julian's appearance. Seeing Julian in debt, my parents were even more opposed. At that time, I even went on a hunger strike at home, not eating or drinking for 3 days and 3 nights. But after being rescued from the operating room, my parents still had stern faces and didn't budge, and even thought I was out of my mind. They secretly hid it from me and sent someone to tell the debt collection company to urge Julian's parents to pay their debts as soon as possible. In fact, my parents' original intention was to let them quickly move out of North City with Julian and never come back, so that I could gradually let go of the idea. But who knew that Julian's parents were psychologically fragile and couldn't withstand the pressure, and directly chose to jump off the building and commit suicide. When things developed to this point, my parents didn't need to say anything more. I knew very well in my heart, Julian and I were probably impossible in this lifetime. Later, in order to help him get through the crisis, I agreed to my parents' request, went abroad, and married the marriage partner they had already chosen for me, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble later. My parents didn't choose to help directly, but instead, they told the head of the lending company to take what he could get and stop, and my parents would help him repay the subsequent payments. Unfortunately, Julian still lost an eye. Cora didn't want you to know these things. She was afraid that you would hate her even more because of it, and even more afraid that you would retaliate against her parents. So she could only choose to swallow her grievances silently. But seeing Cora's unhappiness all these years, I really couldn't bear it, so I let her leave and come back to find you. But what about you? Donovan said, his voice almost choked with sobs. I'll only ask you one question now. Now that you know these facts, do you hate her? Julian knelt on the ground, already in tears. He remembered all the good times we had together 7 years ago, and the grand vows he made back then. And he remembered the scenes 7 years later, when he deliberately humiliated me every day, and my desperate and sad expression when I was impaled on the steel bars. One by one, frame by frame, every scene. Now, they are all like sharp blades, shuttling back and forth through his heart. Julian held my memorial tablet, repeating over and over again, I don't blame you, I don't blame you, I'm sorry, it's all my fault, it's me, it's my fault. Donovan wiped the tears from his face, looked around, and finally realized something. Where's Maya? Where is she? Julian raised his head blankly. Who is Maya? Donovan's right eyelid twitched, and an ominous premonition was born in his heart. Maya, the little girl who went to find you to attend Cora's funeral. Didn't you see her? Actually, you killed Cora, so I didn't want you to see her one last time. But Cora told me before she died that if anything unexpected happened in the future, you and Maya must recognize each other as father and daughter. After Donovan finished speaking, Julian was dumbfounded. You said Maya is my daughter? Of course, I already said that I and Cora have been sleeping in separate beds for the past 7 years. Julian suddenly stood up. Completely ignoring Donovan's shouts behind him, he drove like a madman, returning to the wedding venue as quickly as possible. My soul followed behind him, equally worried. It's been so long, I can't even imagine what Ivy might have done to my daughter. At this time, the wedding venue was empty and everything was quiet. Julian walked into the venue step by step, calling out in a hoarse voice, "Maya? Maya." What responded to him was deathly silence. Walking to the stage, Julian looked at the room where his daughter made her last sound, gently twisted the doorknob. What came into view was a dazzling patch of scarlet red. I covered my mouth, and the heartache was like a fermented bun, expanding rapidly in the steamer. My daughter, small and still, lay quietly on the ground, her face and body covered in scars from being slashed by a dagger. The blood had dyed her entire white dress a bright red. Without a sound, "Maya, Maya?" Julian knelt on the ground, crawling towards his daughter step by step. He wanted to pick her up, but just like when he faced me, there were so many wounds that he didn't know where to start. Ambulance! Ambulance! After a few seconds of blankness, Julian suddenly burst out with a roar, and his daughter was rushed to the hospital for treatment as quickly as possible. Watching my little daughter being pushed into the operating room, my heart felt like it was being ripped out. Not long after, Ivy's figure appeared at the end of the operating room corridor. She walked on high heels and eagerly approached Julian. "Julian, I heard from your assistant that you came to the hospital, so I rushed over." "Who is in this operating room? If it's not that important, you shouldn't be guarding here." "I was busy dealing with that little bitch, and when I went out again, she was gone. Now I've finally caught you, I don't care. You have to continue and finish the wedding." Ivy pouted and acted coquettishly towards him, but what responded to her was indeed Julian's incomparably cold gaze. Ivy was startled and subconsciously let go of Julian's arm, a forced smile on her face. "Julian, what's wrong with you? Don't look at me like that, I'm scared." Julian stared intently at her. His tone was like that of a devil from hell. "You said you used a knife to cut that little girl?" Ivy didn't react. She nodded blankly in acknowledgement. Yes, so what? Isn't she Cora and that man's little bastard? I just gave her a small punishment." Heh. Without warning, Julian curled one side of his lips into a smile. Laughable, yet even more frightening than not smiling at all. "Bastard? Punishment? Good, very good indeed." Ivy also echoed with a grin, but before she could laugh, a heart-wrenching pain almost made her faint. Julian didn't know when he had a knife in his hand, and below was Ivy's severed hand. "You dared to hurt my Julian's daughter, you will pay the price." Ivy screamed in terror, her face full of despair. Boundless regret surged from her heart, but it was already too late. She could only blame herself for foolishly approaching Julian. Knowing full well that his power and status today, built from nothing, were backed by countless bloody storms and ruthless cruelty, but she stubbornly refused to believe it, approached Julian, and even harmed Julian's daughter. Ivy fainted from the pain, and was dragged away by the bodyguards who had arrived. Immediately afterwards, the woman's shrill screams pierced the sky, one louder than the other, before gradually fading away. 2 hours later, the daughter's surgery was finally completed. Fortunately, although the injuries were severe, she was taken to the hospital in time, and most of them were external injuries. With Julian's top-notch medical team, painstakingly gathered, the daughter was finally safe, and as for those wounds, as long as they were carefully cared for afterwards, they wouldn't leave scars. I touched my eyes, which were swollen and unrecognizable from crying. I finally felt a little relieved. In the days that followed, Julian turned down all his work and wholeheartedly took care of his daughter. But even a year later, when his daughter was completely healed and discharged from the hospital, she hadn't called him Dad even once. Faced with the various toys Julian had bought, the daughter didn't even look at them. He sat wearily in front of his daughter's bed, speaking in a humble and gentle tone. "Maya, what exactly do I have to do for you to acknowledge me as your father?" The daughter didn't speak, she just hugged the photo of me and her. She lay down without saying a word. Julian understood his daughter hated him. Hated him for not fulfilling his responsibility as a father for so many years. Hated him for killing me. The overwhelming hatred was destined to prevent his daughter from ever forgiving him. That night, Julian sat alone in the living room smoking one cigarette after another all night long. From then on, Julian never went home again, never appeared in front of his daughter again. Instead, he devoted all his time and energy to the development of the company. Time flew by in a flash. At his daughter's coming-of-age ceremony, Julian, his back already somewhat hunched, looked at her with a full of gratification. Over the years, because of working so hard and not taking care of himself at all, his body had long been depleted. Julian silently walked onto the stage, looking at his daughter with tearful eyes. "Maya, could you just call me Dad?" The scene fell into endless silence. This Dad, Julian never got to hear in the end. After the coming-of-age ceremony, Julian transferred all the assets he had prepared long ago to his daughter's name. Then he took a bouquet of gardenias to the cemetery to see me. He picked a flower and pinned it on my tombstone, smiling. So beautiful. I quietly watched this scene. My thoughts seemed to return to the day I first met Julian. At that time, he was also smiling at me like this. Except that smile was filled with more shyness and excitement. "Classmate, your gardenia is so beautiful, can I get to know you?" "But Julian, I wish I had never met you." I silently said this sentence. Julian's face changed drastically, as if he heard the sound, staring intently in the direction of my soul. "Cora, is that you?" But the next second, he clutched his heart and fell in front of my tombstone. He never got up again. And my soul, at this moment, was also released. My soul slowly drifted to heaven, and I casually glanced down. Julian's soul was getting further and further away from me, entering hell. Next life's reincarnation. "Julian, I never want to know you again.